Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel and welcome back to my DCS Hornet Academy. This is lesson 3 and today we're going to talk about hardware required to be a proficient pilot in DCS and the keybinds, how to do keybinds for that hardware. So we're going to talk about, so the 4 things are, I'm going to start talking about the importance of head tracking or VR. I forgot to mention that. So some sort of head tracking. And then we're going to talk about HOTAS, which stands for hands-on, throttle, and stick. So this, the flight stick and the throttle, and I guess the pedals, if you will want to use those. And then we're going to go over my, keybinds for my Gladiator NXT and Thrustmaster throttle. And then we're going to show you how to set up keybinds within DCS for your controls. So let's get started. So the first thing I would like to talk about is the importance of head tracking in DCS. So for those who may not be aware of what a head tracker is, it is essentially this little device that you put somewhere, typically on top of your monitor or TV or whatever you're using as a screen, and it points directly at your head. And on top of your head, you are essentially going to be using this little thing that reflects the light or whatever, it's a sensor. This thing sends signals, and it looks kind of like this essentially. You plug it in to a USB port, and it is I just checked the pricing, and by the way, the pricing for all of these things probably are in Canadian because I'm in Canada and all my websites are in Canadian dollars, and it's rough. Like I didn't go and check exactly, but all the prices. I took the first price that came up, and I was like, yeah, that's it. So it will run you in this type of range, right? Like all my prices are like plus minus 50 to 100 bucks or whatever. So, anyways, so it is not super cheap. It's not super expensive, but it is probably the most important hardware that you're gonna need if you're running in what we call 2D. Pancake mode, as we like to call it, is when you're not in VR. And what this allows you to do is when you move your head, it will allow you to look around the cockpit and look to your right, to your left, up and down, without having to use the arrow keys on your keyboard or anything like that. I know there's a lot of new student pilots that come through. They don't have this, and they're like, and then they're wondering why they can't fly formation or they can't have good depth perception when you're going to land on a carrier or an airfield. It's hard enough even with this, like especially like dogfighting. The tracker sometimes goes nuts, and especially in dogfights, the most important thing is to always keep an eye on your enemy fighter that you're dogfighting, and so it is extremely important to have this. There are other options that do the same thing. I think Toby is like an eye tracker. You can also have software that links to your webcam if you do have a webcam of some sort. And so there's different options that are typically potentially cheaper. Um, but this is just something you're going to use for the rest of your DCS career. So I would suggest invest the money and don't look back. Um, it is definitely cheaper than VR. And I do have a VR headset, and the only thing is I never got the settings to work quite right. Even though I have a very powerful computer, I just couldn't handle the graphics. The experience within the cockpit it's absolutely breathtaking. It's hard to describe, but once you look outside the cockpit, everything just is just extremely dull. So um, plus, VR headsets are large, hot, and they make you sweaty, and then you can't, you know, it's just tough on the body, and so it's a preference thing. But all I'm gonna say in this slide is get a head tracker or get a VR headset if you want to learn DCS. So if you're going on to this lesson and the next, and you're continuing on this course, I'm gonna assume you're gonna have a head tracker. Don't try it without. All right. Moving on, hardware as far as controlling the aircraft. You cannot fly in DCS with a mouse. You cannot fly with a keyboard. You cannot fly with a gamepad. Let's get that out of the way. Okay. You need a proper flight control system, like they refer to as HOTAS, hands-on throttle and stick. Why? Because you want to have your hands on the controls at all times wherever possible, and you don't have the time, you don't want to waste time looking down um, to find a key on your keyboard unless you use it very rarely, and you know you want to be able to have access to all your buttons and all your controls as quickly and as easily as possible. So HOTAS is just generally refers to the flight stick and the throttle, but I've thrown in the pedals there as well. I don't use pedals. I just have a joystick and a throttle and the head tracker. That's all I use, and that's the bare minimum, right? Then there's people who build like sim pits and stuff like that, but in my view, that's optional. And if you have the money and the time, and you want to go that route, go for it. But this is how you start. As I said, the pedals are optional. The other two are not. So mandatory equipment is the head tracker, the flight stick, and the throttle. Okay. What we're looking at here is the Thrustmaster TWCS throttle, the Thrustmaster and a T16000 stick, and this whole thing comes like as a package if you want, or you can get it as a package with the throttle and the stick, or you can just get them separately. I did have the stick is I think I went through two of them. One of them broke. It's not the most sturdy thing. I'm not going to claim that it is. And I also, I think, went through a throttle, if I remember. They can break easily, but the good news is they're cheap and they're readily available, which is another problem with hardware, especially during COVID and stuff. You can buy like three of these, have two as a backup. Anyways, it's an extremely good starter system, and the throttle is it's the one I use, and it's really really good. Um, it is very close to like a Hornet's throttle, and it's really useful. So if you're considering as a starter pack, this is probably what I would go with, but I would probably I would just get the throttle, and I wouldn't get the other two, and I'll show you why in a second. All right, moving on. This is the Satec or Logitech X56. It is probably one of the most common entry-level sticks as well. Um, it's actually more expensive than the Thrustmaster beginner set, and but I haven't tried this. I heard that it is kind of flimsy and you can break the spring and stuff like that. But Anyways, I'm not going to go into too much detail. It's out there, it's an option, and lots of people use it. It is not a high-end system, but it is. You can see it's got all the buttons, which is one of the more important things is to have a lot of buttons and hats. So and this thing does have them. So yeah, it's a good option. Moving on, this is what the high end looks like as far as Thrustmaster. This is the Warthog Thrustmaster set. The one in the middle, I think, is the A10 stick. The one on the right is the it's a replica F18 Hornet stick, and the one on the left is a throttle. There's anywhere upwards of $600. $600 just for the stick, right? But if you want to have the most authentic stick, you're flying the F18. If you're really into the F18 and you want to have everything exactly as it is in real life, then you get that guy on the right. Um, you know, but it is something that you can upgrade in the future, right? Um, and this is where realism versus sim comes in, because you know, what do you call it? Like for example, that you only have two hats, right? Two hats up there and on the thumb and um, on the upper portion, and one right here. Most sticks actually out there have three, so you're actually losing out on a bunch of buttons by going realistic, right? Um, but hey, it's there, you know. Here in this case, I would probably recommend the stick and not the rest of it for the price, and that's only if you want to go authentic. The next one is uh, it's a Chinese company, but it is actually one of the most popular among DCS as far as um, hardware because they make either very close replicas to the actual F18 and F16 and F15 sticks, and also they're relatively cheap and they're relatively good quality, and they have a ton of buttons, and they actually try to replicate cockpits and like from the F18, for example. So this one is the F18 one. You can see that it's a replica, kind of like this one, but you can see that the quality is, seems to be a bit lower. I mean, but price for quality is probably, this is what I want to upgrade to, or I won't even say upgrade, like, because what I have right now, yeah, I guess it's twice the amount of money of what I have right now, but it's not about the money. I mean, I'm happy with what I have right now. It works for me. But if I had to upgrade, this is what I would get, right? I would get this. So just FYI, and I know lots of people have these, lots of buttons. You got the split throttles. You have the detent, which is a big thing for the afterburner and all that stuff. So this is probably highly recommended for Hornet pilots. Probably like one of the best for control systems. This one is VKB. This is kind of what I have. On the left is a VKB NX Gladiator NXT. I absolutely love this stick. It's very cheap compared to other sticks, and it's absolutely great quality. It's amazing. I got three hat switches on the top. I got the button here. I got the two level trigger. There's another button back here in the pinky for your paddle switch. You get a four-way switch here. There is a eight-way hat here and a stick. You can switch between them. I think this one is a four-way plus push. This is four-way plus push. Um, Absolutely fantastic stick, and I love it to death, and I don't see a need to upgrade it. So um, for the longest time, Gladiator didn't have throttles, and they came up with one. Apparently, it's twice the price of the stick, but yeah, I mean, just looking at it, looks I don't know, looks like it's not a replica, right? So it's just yeah, a bunch of buttons. All right. But yeah, I mean, if it does have a ton of them, which is always good to have lots of buttons on your HOTAS. So it's probably something to consider, but I mean, if I had to go for a throttle, I would go for one of the Winwing Hornet replicas, or because it's just closer to it. I don't know, but yeah, maybe it's a good, good one. Again, it's not super expensive like the other ones. And if you want the king of, well, I don't want to say king, the most expensive throttle, this is from Whirlpool. I think this is like 500 or 600 bucks or euros. I don't even check the actual price, but it is up there. I guess in the 4, 5, 600s. Um, again, it's probably very high quality, but they all kind of do the job, right? So it's whatever buttons you really want to see and whatever features you want to see. So this is the Warthog one. It's like $480, so this would be another option. Um, this is the WinWing MFDs, DDIs, whatever you want to call them, for the Hornet. This is something I do plan to get in the future. There's a lot of people who do have these. They essentially create the screens that are within your cockpit and your UFC or upfront control panel there, which are part of the cockpit. So it's about 500 bucks for this whole thing, I'm pretty sure. And uh, or maybe it's 800. I might have put that one wrong. But anyways, it's in that range. It's not super cheap, but you're essentially reproducing part of the F-18 cockpit, which I think would add a whole other level of immersion to DCS. And I think one day I'm gonna get it. It's on my to get list. It's just not a priority right now. And this is an example of what a collective would look like for helicopters. I know we're Hornet Academy here, and we're going to talk about the Hornet, but I'm also a big fan of helicopters, and I thought I'd throw this in there. This is a $400, and this is from WinWing as well. This is a collective. This is the one with that you use to change the pitch on the blades on a helicopter, and it probably makes helicopter flying a lot easier. So yeah. Anyways, that's it on the overview of uh, the hardware. So mandatory is get a stick with lots of hats and buttons on it, get the throttle with lots of hats and buttons on it, and get a head tracker. I recommend Track IR if you're in 2D, and VR if you're in VR, right? So those are the minimum requirements that you absolutely need to have. And we're gonna just go ahead and take a look at how to set up all of those wonderful buttons now within the game. So stay tuned.